story begins in New York City in 1995 during a horrific fire that engulfed one of the buildings. Ben Reilly and his colleague, Laurie, rushed to be the first on the scene to take pictures for the newspaper. Ben is a clone of Peter Parker, created by Norman Osborn, who wanted the clone to become his heir. The fire was actually started by Dr. Octopus, who wanted to lure Ben out in the open and kidnap him, claiming he had a doctor's appointment. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, at Parker Industries, the real Peter Parker was having a meeting with Tony Stark. Peter had become a businessman after creating a successful telecommunications company, and Tony wanted to merge it with Stark International. However, Peter accused Tony of making weapons and funding wars across the world, refusing his offer, which caused Tony to storm out of the office. Building the company had taken away most of Peter's free time, and he hated the businessman he had become. But every now and then, he still enjoyed putting on the Spider-Man costume and fighting crime on the streets. He eventually encountered Dr. Octopus, who was destroying the city to lure Spider-Man out, and succeeded. Otto knew Spider-Man's secret identity, as they used to work together, and he had even dated Aunt May for a while. Peter wasn't young anymore, and even his doctor had advised him to stick to lifting cars, not buses. His spider sense warned him of incoming dangers, but his body struggled to react fast enough. Eventually, Dr. Octavius pinned him to the ground with one of the cars and knocked him unconscious using a nerve gas. Peter woke up inside a lab and saw Ben Reilly tied up across from him. Harry Osborn was helping Octavius, who wanted to capture both Peter and his clone to study them. Octavius wanted to learn how Ben was created because he was getting old and wanted to clone himself. However, the tests revealed something shocking. Ben Reilly was the real Peter Parker all along, while Peter was nothing more than a clone with his memories. Upon hearing this, Ben went completely berserk, breaking free from his restraints and attacking the doctor, claiming he had stolen his life. He started beating him senseless while Peter convinced Harry to free him. Peter was able to stop Ben from killing the doctor. Ben then broke down in tears, asking if Peter had suspected anything all these years. For the past 17 years, Ben had lived a simple life, believing he was the clone, while Peter enjoyed a rich life as a successful businessman. Otto lay on the ground, bitter about the two Peter Parkers, and still tried to attack them. Ben reacted quickly and dodged one of Otto's arms, but Peter froze in the moment. Luckily, Harry jumped in front, taking a direct hit and successfully protecting his friend. Otto got up and tried to escape, but Ben chased after him, calling him a murderer. He was knocked out by one of Otto's arms, but Peter caught him before he fell to his death. Peter ran back inside and hugged Ben tightly as he gave his last breath. Ben said he was happy to have been Peter's friend all these years, and then he died. The next day, the two Peters met on top of a building to talk about what had happened. Peter said he had no idea he was a clone, but he had grown tired of living the businessman lifestyle and wanted to quit. He offered Ben the chance to become Peter Parker and gave him all his secret files, including passwords, routines, access to the private lab, and all of his costumes. Deep down, Peter knew Ben was eager to live this life, after having been robbed of it for the past 17 years. Before leaving the city, Peter had one final thing to do. He visited Norman Osborn, who had recently been freed from prison after Peter had turned him into the police. Norman was old now and pretended to be senile, claiming he didn't know who Peter was. But Peter knew this was all an act. Norman had been the one who told Otto Peter's secret identity and about the cloning, and he had given Otto access to his old equipment at Oscorp. Norman resented Peter for sending him to prison and ruining his life, so he tried one final time to ruin Peter's. But Peter was smarter. He had done his own testing and found out that he was, in fact, the real Peter Parker, and that Ben was still the clone. Peter had played along because he wanted to leave the businessman life behind and live freely. He told Norman that Otto had killed his son, which caused Norman's crazed side to surface one more time. Norman accused Peter of killing his son and tried to attack him with one of his gliders, but Peter simply crushed it with his hands. Norman became even angrier and said it would never be over, but out of nowhere, a sudden chest pain overcame him. He had a heart attack and died in Peter's arms, while Peter couldn't believe what was happening. Peter left New York and flew away to meet someone he hadn't seen in a very long time. His wife, Mary Jane, had left him some time ago and settled outside New York to raise their two children, Benji and Claire. She still loved him. Peter had neglected them while trying to run his company and be Spider-Man at the same time, but now, everything was going to change.